the moderator for today's presentation, Recover Together, Eliminating Tough Love and Embracing Loving Well. I want to welcome everyone to the Opiate and Other Drugs virtual series provided by St. Clair County Community Mental Health in partnership with the Community Services Coordinating Body. This webinar series is made possible by a grant award from SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. A few things to note as we get started today. Today's session is being recorded. Please feel free to use the chat box to ask questions at any time during the presentation, and if time allows, we'll do our best to have them answered at the end. Continuing education credits are offered today for anyone who signed up for these during registration. Please make sure that when you signed into Zoom today, you used your full first and last name. This is how we are able to make sure these credits get assigned to you. The series will have an in and out code that participants will need to enter in the quiz in order to receive those continuing ed credits. Today's in code is DOOR, D-O-O-R. We'd like to welcome Katie Donovan. Katie is a family, life, and relationship coach, a speaker, writer with a passion for empowering women. She has been interviewed on ABC, NBC, Fox Sports, and featured in Time and Money magazine cover stories. Katie's award-winning blog has reached over 1 million views and has been syndicated in over 30 publications, including USA Today and Babel. And with that, I will turn it over to Katie.
Can you hear me? Perfect. Thank you. I'm just so excited to be here. It's an absolute honor. I feel like the family piece has been something that, for me personally, was missing. And I'll go into a little bit of my story, but I won't go into the depth of it because I don't think it's going to help for what this purpose is. But I do want to tell families, number one, is that I understand. I understand the pain that you're in. I understand the fear that you have every minute of every day. And whether that fear is when your loved one is struggling currently with substances, or even if they're in recovery, that fear of what if can paralyze you. You see, my daughter, Brittany, the beautiful girl in the photo, was just, as such a young girl, she would walk into a room and just light it up, bouncing, wanting to try everything. We were the total typical suburban family, right? The photo that is on your screen to the right of my whole, to the left of my whole family is when we took a vacation in Florida for Easter, where all of us go sometimes, right, to escape our winter weather. And it's my husband and my little one at the time. My husband was her basketball coach, her soccer coach, and I taught her catechism class, Bible study, the Girl Scout leader, the PTA mom. Our house was the house that everyone kind of hung out at for pool parties and sleepovers, and we really wanted to be so involved in our kids' lives, getting to know their friends, and just being a part of it. I would volunteer at her school, and even in middle school, and volunteering at the lunchroom, right? Because you want to see who they're sitting with and who they should hang out with, and maybe who they shouldn't. Brittany wanted to try everything, whether it was baton, band, dance class, softball, you name it, she tried it, and she dove in head first. She was on the honor roll right through her senior year. And unfortunately, like so many others, hers began in her senior year of high school. And this was back in 2008/9. And she started to date a boy. He seemed like a good kid, good family, no issues, and he played hockey. Well, little did I know that he and several other members of his hockey team had been prescribed Vicodin due to their hockey injuries. And that became their party drug on weekends. She didn't really smoke pot. She didn't really drink, anything like that. And we never really had any issues with her growing up. In fact, I remember when she was in 11th grade, she was invited to prom by a senior. And I thought to myself, I don't know, right? Should we let her go? Should we not let her go? He's a senior. It's prom, right? But we did let her go. And I don't know about you guys, but in our house we had a safe word, a code word, where if our kids were ever in a situation that made them feel uncomfortable, we wanted them to know that they could use this safe word and we would pick them up, no questions asked. And our code word was Bible. And that evening at prom, she called me and I answered the phone and I said, hi, right? Is everything okay? Why is she calling? And she said, Bible. And of course, your heart starts to do one of these, right? And you're like, oh my gosh, what's going on? Is she in trouble? She said, Mom, and she's whispering, Mom, I'm fine. But my ride's been drinking and I don't feel safe. Can you come pick me up? And I was so proud of her at that moment. And I thought, right, we did it. We did it, right? So when she began experimenting, I guess you could say, with pills, I wasn't aware of it. I didn't know that this was happening. What I saw was my daughter slowly slipping away. I saw her going from being a thriving, beautiful woman to not wanting to be around the family anymore and having a complete attitude, not wanting to be around her little sister who was the love of her life. They're 12 years apart, but they were so close. And again, I'm not going to go into all of the details because we'd be here forever. But within about a year of her experimenting, she became completely addicted to heroin. And I remember when she told me, Mom, I'm scared. I don't know what to do, but I don't know how to stop. And she was sobbing. And as a parent, I had never really even knew anyone or even really heard of anyone taking heroin. And what I had only seen was what was in the movies or on the news, and usually it wasn't displayed in a positive light, right? I never once envisioned my own daughter. And I cried with her. And I remember holding her in my arms and just rocking back and forth, saying, it's going to be okay. We're going to get through this. I had no idea the wild ride that we would be on for the next 12 years. The very first treatment center that she went to, she was discharged after 5 days. I didn't know any better. I thought, okay, well, she must be okay then. She just needs to come home and get some home mama cooking and love and family time. And That lasted just a few weeks. And I remember waking up with a sticky note on my nightstand, and it just said, "Mom, I'm so sorry." And she was gone. The house that you see in the photo is called a trap house. And that is where she lived for about the next year. And as a parent, I couldn't comprehend this. I didn't understand what was happening. I didn't understand the disease. I was angry and I was scared. And I tried to do everything to get her out of there. And throughout the years, her addiction took her to many, many scary places, many different states. And about 5 or 6 years into it, she was texting me and she said, "Mom, I'm so sorry. I just can't do this anymore. I'm tired of disappointing everyone. I'm tired of disappointing myself. Please tell Dad and Brooke," that's her sister, "that I love them." And I knew what she meant. She was going to try and take her life. It was becoming too much for her to handle. And I didn't know where she was, and I couldn't find her, and I'm calling and she's not answering. And I'm trying to find friends, anyone that would have any idea where she was. And I got a tip that she was at a Chase Bank in the bathroom. And so I called 911. And I was honest with them. I said, "My daughter is attempting to take her life," but I also knew the risks involved, that she could potentially have something on her. So that picture in the middle there is when EMS took her to the hospital, but I didn't get the phone call that she was there until 7 hours later. And this is her. She was in a hallway with no attention being given to her. And I remember arriving, and such stigma and judgment was being presented to me. "We'll get to her when we get to her," type of thing. And I didn't understand. This is a medical issue. She's overdosing. She's barely breathing. How come no one is paying attention to her? And I finally had to yell out, "She's overdosing." And finally, they came in and they started to give her a life-saving antidote. But with that, she did have one Xanax on her, which was a felony. And she ended up going to jail for that. And again, I don't want to go into all of the details because I don't want to bore you with it, honestly. As a family member, it's one of the most difficult things to go through, to see your child struggle, to see her in and out of recovery, to see the challenges that are being faced. People think sometimes it's just about the substances. It's so much deeper than that. And as family members, I was really not a part of that process of healing. You're lucky if maybe you get a 20-minute call with a therapist. Years and years of overdose after overdose after overdose. Seizures. I've given her CPR myself and given her Narcan many, many times. And then the miracle happened. She started to become stronger. And she started to focus on herself. But that didn't happen until I started to focus on myself. And we'll get into that in a few. I was so proud of my daughter for 3 magical years. She poured herself into recovery. Everything was falling into place. She bought her own car. Our family was healing again, and together we were having dinners together, doing puzzles. For those that have been through this, you can probably understand how something as simple as doing a puzzle together can mean more than anything. This is my daughter, and at the time her boyfriend. And this was a post that she had on social media one day, and she said, on Sundays we slay and pray. And she would go to a morning meeting and then to church. And then they would go and sit on the beach and read the big book. Three days after that picture was taken, Adam died. He died in her apartment while she was away on a business trip. We don't know what happened, but I can tell you that it put my daughter on a spiral of a roller coaster that it was really hard for her to get off of. And for the past 3 years, she's really been struggling. And I didn't know how to help her. It's devastating what this can do. And I bring up this slide because this was me, although it says son. Son, I completed all 12 steps for you. They're in your bedroom with your clean laundry. And I share that because for so long, I needed to control her outcomes. I thought if she just did what I said, everything would be okay. And I never wanted her to struggle, so I was doing everything for her. I did it from a place of love, but I thought I wanted to take any challenges that she had away so she could just focus on herself. But what I wasn't doing was giving her the dignity to try on her own. In the beginning of this, again, no one thinks that this is going to happen to someone in your family. And we hear a lot of stigma and judgment. You hear whispers of, where were the parents, right? Or, did you hear about Johnny, right? Stop killing your kid. One of the first treatment centers that she went to, a therapist told me that. And I was so offended. I couldn't believe that he would think that of me. Why would I ever Why would I ever do that? And a lot of these sayings and phrases, no one really explained what they were. And I will tell you, I had my own breakdown of sorts several years ago. I remember my husband calling me in the morning and he said, Kate, can you take the garbage out? I forgot. Obviously, usually it's not a big deal. But for some reason at that moment, it really was for me. And I lost it. I lost it. And I just went off on him. And I'm screaming and I'm yelling and I'm crying. I'm swearing. Just leave me alone. Everyone, just leave me alone. Because I felt at that moment, if someone asked me to do one more thing, I'm going to lose it. Because I felt pulled in so many different directions, trying to save my daughter. And every moment I was obsessed with saving her. I'm trying to maintain my corporate career. I have my younger daughter that I'm trying to be a good mom to and be a good wife and have this perfect little family. So when I was asked to take out the garbage, I jumped in my car and I took off. And I drove and I drove and I drove and I drove. And I remember crying my eyes out and I'm yelling at the people on the road and I'm looking for trees that I can drive my car into. And I knew these aren't normal thoughts. All I wanted to do was take my pain away. I wanted to take my family's pain away. And I didn't know how to make it stop. And I felt like an absolute failure. By the grace of God, my husband found me that day. And he said, Katie, please, you've got to get some help. You've got to get some help. People had told me in the past, you need to get some support and go to some support groups. And I thought, I'm not the one with the problem, right? Why do I need help? I'm fine. If she would just do what I said, everything would be fine. So that evening, I looked up some support groups. And the next day, I drove to one. And I pulled my car into the parking lot. I put it in park. And then I sat in my car the entire hour and I cried my eyes out. And then I went home. And my husband said, how did it go? And I said, it was wonderful. I totally lied. I sat in my car because walking in at that moment, to me, it meant that I was a failure as a parent. I was a failure as a wife, that I couldn't fix my family. I couldn't fix my daughter. But I kept going back. And eventually I did go in person. And I'm so glad that I did. But with that, I was also learning from different types of therapists and groups and well-meaning friends and family. These phrases and meanings that they have to hit bottom. What is bottom? What is bottom? For my daughter, at least, it kept getting lower and lower and lower. It was dropping. And for many, that's actually death. Bottom's death. That I'm supposed to let go and detach. I'm just supposed to not even speak to her. And they were putting time limits on this too. Practicing this tough love, Katie. Don't talk to her till she has a year clean. Don't have any communication until XYZ happens. And then I'm totally powerless. They can't do anything about it. Just go on with your life. None of this felt normal to me. But I was trying to practice it. But I also felt like, in a way, I was punishing her. And I understand that there are certain ways to go about this. That doesn't have to be a punishment. Families, we are completely labeled. We're enablers, we're codependent, we're resistant, or you're just in denial. You need to get some boundaries. No one explained exactly what that meant. Families who are going through this, you're loving your child the best way that you know how at that moment. And as you grow and gain strength, your knowledge will grow. So if you are being labeled with these things, I want you to know that I know you're doing everything out of love. We shouldn't have these labels. Education needs to be done on what these things truly are. We don't have to take them literally. There is power in love. There is power in having a healthy relationship. For a long time, I didn't understand. And so when I was called these things, I started to isolate again, right? We reach out for help, but then we're called these names and no explanation of how to fix it, how to work through it. Sometimes in the support groups, you're not even allowed to talk. How is that helping? How are labeling and blaming families helping? Because what are we really feeling? We're feeling complete anxiety, worry, fear. It's paralyzing us. And with that, sometimes we get really angry. We get very resentful. We feel guilt. We feel shame, sometimes embarrassment. Many times we go into complete depression. Most of all, we're grieving. Yes, we are grieving. We are grieving what could have been. We are grieving visions that we may have had. Approaching families with evidence-based strength modalities, leading with empathy and leading with education is what is needed. We need to begin to remove these stigmas. For so many, especially myself, I totally lost my identity. I was so obsessed with saving her. If she was clean, I was happy. Everything was wonderful, right? But if she was using again, I was a mess. I couldn't get out of bed. I couldn't focus. Families, we are the cleanup crew. We rescue in every situation, right? We want to fix it all. If she called and said, Mom, my car just broke down, or I got a flat tire, normally, before I became educated, I would say, I got this, right? Tow truck is on its way. I'm calling Bell Tire. We have an appointment. I found a tire. It's $40. It's all set. I thought she couldn't handle it. So I was wrapping my arms around every single situation to fix. If she got out of treatment and maybe she was in a sober living home, or maybe she was living at home, it didn't really matter. Sometimes I applied for a job for her. I'm admitting. I would set my alarm to make sure that she was up in time. I had her uniform pressed. I had a lunch packed. Everything was ready to go because I thought my fear was controlling. My fear was saying, if she doesn't get out of bed, she's going to lose her job. She's going to get fired. And she's going to relapse and she's going to die. There was no in between. My fear drove me to do all of these things. As families, we completely stopped doing things for ourselves. I know I stopped seeing friends. I didn't want to go out to dinner with my husband because usually it ended up into some kind of argument. We were usually on different pages, and all we talked about was addiction. I would become resentful, right? I gave you $20. I fixed your car. I was putting all of these expectations on her. And becoming very, very angry and resentful if she didn't do it how I thought she should do it. How is that fair? How do I know what's best for her recovery? I don't. I wasn't giving her a chance, though, to even try. My marriage was really becoming strained. Relationships were becoming strained. The whole family was being affected. And what happens when things start to become really toxic? You're battling, and then you just become so exhausted, you just stop talking. And division starts to occur. You know, I was there for my youngest daughter, but I wasn't really there. I was going through the motions. I also felt like, but they are the okay ones. My husband and my youngest daughter, they're okay. Brittany needs me. She needs me. She's sick. I have to help. I had some really, really, really negative coping behaviors. I was completely obsessing. I was controlling. And yes, families, we manipulate too. We're going to say and we're going to do anything that we can to get them to do what we want them to do, how we view success. What really is success? Think about what you view success as. I had to really pull back and realize that my vision of success was actually harming her being successful. Success is getting out of bed. Success is her calling and making a doctor's appointment and following through. Success is her doing things on her to-do list, not mine. Not mine. Family members, we become defensive, argumentative, especially with others in the family who feel that they want to tell us what we should be doing, right? I'm certainly a people pleaser. I couldn't say no to anything. And sometimes we give and we give and we give and we're fixing. And then it becomes about us. We turn it to about us. After all I've done for you, that's not about them. That's about us. I had to do some really deep work to learn this. That's not going to help our loved ones. I also, a huge coping mechanism of mine, excuse me, was taking on too much. I was volunteering for everything I could even imagine. I was probably on eight different boards. I had 10 different projects going on, and I'm completely involved in writing here and speaking here, and then when I was crumbling, because I thought if I stopped for 1 second, I couldn't get back up again. So I had to keep moving, because otherwise my mind was going to keep whirling. I'm going to skip this because I'm looking at the time. I read this quote not too long ago, and it really touched me. It says, at the heart of every relationship is communication. If the people in the relationship cannot find a way to tell each other what they need, what they want, and what they appreciate in each other, the relationship is skating on thin ice. I wasn't showing my appreciation. I have this column called Shift Happens, and it's about communication. It is about learning how to accept what someone is feeling without judgment. And when I say without judgment, for example, my husband and I, one of the key things that we had to do to work on our marriage was sharing how the other person felt, and honor and validating. If he said to me, Kate, when you said this, it really ticked me off. I couldn't come back and say, well, I did that because you blah, blah, blah. That's just going to be an argument. That's just going to be another roller coaster that's going in circles, because both of us are wanting to be heard, right? We're wanting to be heard. We want someone to agree with us. That's ego. And we do it in so many different ways, not just in marriages, but with our loved ones. That's ego. It's also me saying, Brittany, what do you mean you didn't go to a meeting today? You said you were going to go to 3 meetings. If I can't even walk into a meeting, how am I expecting her to? If my husband is sharing to me, or anyone is sharing to me how they feel about something, I now say, thank you for sharing. I really appreciate you telling me that. It doesn't mean that I'm agreeing, because guess what? It doesn't matter. You're honoring each other. Someone's feelings aren't wrong. It's just how they feel. And when we start to begin to honor and validate that is when shift happens. An example of communication with my child and what can be healing going forward. It's just tweaking some small little things. Many times we just want them to be well, right? Why don't you get off your butt and get a job? Don't you have any self-respect? That's shame. That's shaming, right? And I understand in our heads, we're like, oh, if you just work, right? Or it would be okay. But what if you shifted your language? What if you shifted your response from emotional? What if you shifted it to saying, you know, it's got to be really hard for you to look for a job and really scary to have an interview. And it may be frightening for someone to ask you, you haven't worked in 2 years. What's been going on? That can be paralyzing. Do you want to talk about it? We just did these small changes in how we communicate with someone. And always the shift will happen. I promise you. Instead of me calling the tow truck, instead of me saying, I've got this, what if I said, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry that happened. What do you think you can do? We're honoring, we're listening, we're leading with love. If you say to someone, I don't like it when you disrespect me, you got to be very clear. Maybe it's swearing. Maybe if they're swearing at you, be very clear. It's that old saying, say what you mean what you say, but don't say it mean. I want you to know, no matter what, if you're watching this and you're struggling with this, there's probably a lot of toxic things around you. It can suck the life out of you. Whether it's social media, whether it's negative friends, relatives, etc., you may need to remove yourself from anything that is toxic for you. Surround yourself with support and people that understand it with lived experiences. I believe in my heart about recovering together as a family. Do you truly listen to your loved one when they're sharing? Do you truly listen? Or are you listening to react? Because when we react, it's emotional based. Practice that pause and respond. Sometimes you don't always have to embrace every single conversation, and every single conversation doesn't have to be an argument. The biggest thing that helped me was acceptance. I am going to love and I accept my daughter wherever she's at, emotionally, mentally, physically, and remove all expectations because it is not my life. But I am going to love her and I am going to walk next to her during this journey, holding her hand as her mom. And I've learned the differences now of what I'm willing to help with and not. Those are boundaries. And many times people will say, oh, you got to get some boundaries, right? Boundaries are for us. So if you're going to create a boundary, make sure you follow through with it. Otherwise, it's just a suggestion. And I can love her in a healthy way. Dave Cook wrote this amazing book called The Addicted Child, and he says, your loved one's recovery is not your business, and it's not. It also means when we give that positive reinforcement, we don't always have to bring it back to addiction. For example, gosh, it's so good to see you smile when you're sober. Gosh, your eyes are so sparkly when you're not using. How about we just leave it at your eyes are so sparkly? They don't need to be continually reminded about addiction. I just realized I've been talking for a while, so it's 11:45. I want to try and get to some questions if we have some, but just quick couple of things to help families also focus on themselves. I will say journaling really, really helped me. And it wasn't, I've never really written before, right? Journaling was when I had a crisis moment, I needed to write it down and I needed to be honest. I needed to be honest with myself. It was for no one else to see, but I had to say, this happened. Here's how I reacted. And what it allowed me to do was see my own patterns and see my own behaviors, and also knowing that there are things that I can control, which is my reaction, and process the things that I can't control. Spending time with my husband, looking at him as a partner again, as a friend, and not someone that I need to battle with. Truly saying, I love you for you, and shifting our focus back on ourselves, where you can laugh and not feel guilty, where you can talk about life. You can go out and do activities. I'm telling you, when you make those small shifts, for a long time I couldn't, I felt so guilty. When you make those small shifts, your entire family dynamic will change. All of it. When you gain strength, your loved one gains strength. So I thank you so much. Whoops. How do we go back? Can I open it up to questions if there's any? I know I kind of buzzed through this.
There you go. Okay, so we don't have any in the chat yet, but I encourage all of you to go ahead and put those questions in there, and we can have Katie speak to any of those things you might be wondering about. I had a question, just knowing how many of our professional staff from our organization and many others are on this session today. Are there things that professionals can do to kind of help support that concept of, the recovering well together versus that tough love approach that I think is kind of in the forefront of people's minds still?
Mm-hmm. And I think it's natural, right? I mean, this has been a way of practice for so long. But to really empathize and think of it, if it was their own loved one, their own child. And it is very difficult because as parents, you grow up, or your children grow up, we're caretakers. You teach them how to ride their bike. You give them medicine when they're sick. But when it comes to this disease, we are punishment mode. We are giving them negativity and withdrawing love. You can love someone and not be a part of the roller coaster. You can take a step back with that. And so helping families gain that strength and learning to navigate with the boundaries and truly accepting families where they're at in their journey as well. Many times it's really difficult for them to say no to certain things. So it's approaching them in baby steps. What are you comfortable doing? And let's talk about that. It can't be all or nothing.
So we had a question come in. It says, my nephew, age 25, just passed away due to an overdose. And I was wondering, what do I say to them? I think meaning the family, or what not to say. They're feeling like it's their fault.
Sometimes you don't have to say anything. The biggest form of support could be, do you want to have a cup of coffee? Do you want to take a walk together? And just listen. Sometimes we want to fix others because we want them to feel better, and we struggle to find the right words. But the biggest form of support can be holding their hand and saying, I'm going to love you through this. This has got to be so hard for you. I know many times I felt like my daughter, I was grieving someone who was still alive. And there were times where friends would give me guidance. And sometimes I would become offended, like, you don't even understand, right? And it's okay to not understand. And it's okay to say, I can't comprehend this, but I'm going to love you through it. That can be the biggest form of support. There's also, if she wanted to give them a support group, there's one called GRASP. And it's specifically for those that have loved ones that have passed away from substances. And it can be a really good form of support as well.
Yeah, any of those resources, places that you routinely refer people to, if you want to get that info to us, we have the ability to email all of our attendees
Okay.
today, and we'd be happy to share any of that information. I did type the link to your blog in the chat, but we want to send that out to the
Okay.
whole group as well. And I think we have time for one more question. I know we have a lot of parents on this session as well. So going back to the kind of the beginning of your talk today, did you see any signs with your daughter right when things kind of first started? Signs that she was using, signs that she was in trouble, under stress, things like that?
Looking back, I definitely saw signs. I just didn't realize that they were signs. She seemed to get the flu a lot. And I thought, I mean, I was taking her to the doctor all the time, thinking she must have, something medically wrong with her. Why is she throwing up all the time? She was really withdrawing from the family, having a big attitude. I chalked it up to, well, she's 18, 19. She's a female. I know sometimes I probably wasn't the nicest to my mom when I was that age, unintentionally, hormonally. Isolating. And again, I thought, well, this is her time to blossom. This is her time to spread her wings. And most of those things can be very normal. But looking back, it wasn't for her. It wasn't. And I also probably didn't want to think that something was wrong, so I didn't dig in further.
So our last one before we wrap up isn't a question, it's just a comment I wanted to read to you from William. It says, no question, I just want to say this was very powerful testimony to all the power of addiction and how it can impact those that we would least expect it. And I think that's a real good wrapping up point for us today.
Thank you so much, William.
So we just want to thank you for your time today and for your story. I know it was very impactful and inspirational for people, and I think really helps people to realize that they're not alone in this journey.
Thank you. Thank you. It was such an honor, and thank you so much for your organization and doing this. It's going to help a lot of families, all the webinars that you have.
That is our hope.